am glad that we're not on the Penn State's not on the coaching carousel right now, because it's going to be a wild one, especially when Matt Campbell likely leaves Iowa State. It sounds like he's trending towards USC at the moment. And like I said, Billy Napier probably heading to Florida from what it sounds like. And of course, they may go after Brent Pry if that happens. I guess the question is now, perhaps with this new contract, I would think assistant salaries went up again as well, including Brent Pry's. So the question now becomes for Brent Pry, does he value money more than he values being a head coach somewhere?
Well, I think the one thing that might be the question for Brent Pry is how much do you value a happy wife? Because his wife is a Louisiana native who he met well on the staff down at Lafayette back in the day. So that could be – and now on Pry's end, he is an Altoona, Pennsylvania native who, for those who don't know, Altoona is only about a half hour or so from State College. And
45 minutes. But
yeah, less than an hour. So,
yeah.
And I know he still has family in Altoona, so, that could always factor into things also. I will say, though, with this offseason, especially considering Napier is most likely going to leave, if he does stick around, I feel confident saying Pry and his family are very content with him just staying at Penn State as defensive coordinator, which, I've been critical of Pry in the past, but ultimately I think anybody would take that. Yes, the defense struggled today, but I've said all season long, and I stand by it, I think this is the best coaching job Brent Pry has done as Penn State's defensive coordinator, especially up front. Now, obviously, John Scott Jr. deserves a lot of credit for the success of the defensive line also, but to lose 3 of your projected 4 starters from the preseason at some point during the year and have to throw young guys who probably weren't ready to be playing big minutes into the fire and see them succeed the way they did, Pry and Scott Jr. both deserve a ton of credit for that. So, and I think one thing with Pry, we really saw him grow as a coach this year, where a lot of his blitz schemes and things of that nature became a lot more exotic than they were in years past, which led to an improved pass rush from the Nittany Lions and getting to the quarterback. And I know the sack numbers weren't quite as high as they've been in the past, but anyone who watched Penn State will tell you that their defense made life a living hell on quarterbacks most of the season. Even today included, they were in Peyton Thorne's face a lot, just a lot of missed tackles and things of that nature that came back to burn them. But no, with the coaching staff, I'm definitely in the group of people who are extremely frustrated with the Franklin regime and where things are at right now. I think everyone would agree the performance the last 2 seasons has not been acceptable or up to the standards of Penn State.
And Franklin will tell you that too, probably.
Exactly. James Franklin, the first person to tell you that going 4-5 and then 7-5 is not acceptable. But at the same time, like you said, this coaching carousel, as wild as it's going to be, with LSU on the market, Florida on the market, USC on the market, excuse me, some of the top names, like a Luke Fickell, like a Dave Aranda, appear to be close to signing extensions and staying at their schools. And there's a heck of a lot of smoke for Lincoln Riley to LSU. So even if that happens, then Oklahoma opens up. So you're competing with another, college football playoff level program in a coaching search. So it's definitely a year, I wouldn't want to be on the coaching market. Not to get totally off topic, but that's one of the reasons why I was kind of surprised Florida did move on from Dan Mullen instead of just kind of chalking it up and seeing what happens next year and moving on, just because, you're the teams you're competing with. But yeah, it's definitely a year where not being on the coaching market, and especially a position like Penn State where you have a coach who's had the success Franklin has had in the past, definitely a good year to not have to be looking for a head coach, I feel.
Right. You mentioned Oklahoma as well could open up. That would be another big blue blood to be competing with. I guess looking around the Big Ten, speaking of blue bloods, Ohio State goes down to Michigan for the first time in 10 years. Michigan knocks off Ohio State 42-27. They clinch the Big Ten East. They will face Iowa next week for all the Big Ten marbles because Wisconsin got beat on the road at Minnesota, 23-13. Artie, how do you see this Big Ten championship game shaking out next week? Does Iowa have a shot? And if Michigan does make the playoff, how do you think they would fare?
First off, if Michigan does make the playoff, I'm assuming they're the 2 or 3 seed, and it's like, with the way their defense plays, would it really surprise you to see them get the national championship game and then play Georgia? Because, I mean, who are they going to play? Cincinnati, maybe Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. It's just I could definitely see that happening.
I feel like Cincy's going to get the 4th seed the way this is.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I think if Cincy does get in, the committee will put him at the 4th seed. So you're probably looking at like a 1-loss Big 12 champion, a 1-loss Notre Dame, who quite frankly has no business being anywhere near the playoff, but by process of elimination may do it. As for next week, I mean, it's tough for me. Like, personally, I'd love to see Iowa win. Not that I like Iowa or anything, but just – and I know we had a really long discussion about this in our Black Sheet Irish Slack channel earlier. And Tim, I know you and I are on the same page. Michigan reaching the playoff is not good for Penn State because Michigan now can, on the recruiting trail, can go out there and flash a more recent win over Ohio State. If they can flash a more recent Big Ten championship and the fact they've been to the playoff and Penn State hasn't, that's a game changer in recruiting. And Michigan's already a school that has a bigger brand than Penn State. Even though Penn State has unequivocally been the better program the last 15, 16 years, I think in the eyes of a lot of people, they still see Michigan as a better program. So having a season like this that kind of reaffirms those things is not good for the Nittany Lions and just makes – and really for the Big Ten as a whole, because it's similar to the ACC with Clemson. You have that one school in Ohio State who is your playoff bell cow, and you just know, hey, if we can overcome the Buckeyes, we're in good shape. Well, if it becomes we can overcome the Buckeyes and the Wolverines, that makes it more challenging for everybody. So, I mean, I said I will be rooting for Iowa next week. I don't think they'll win. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a low-scoring defensive battle. Ultimately, though, I think Michigan, especially Blake Corum looking healthy again today, and Caden McNamara continuing to come along with that passing game, I think Michigan will have enough firepower to get it done.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to pick Michigan next week. I mean, I think that Iowa secondary is still right for picking, and McNamara is a good enough thrower that they can get a few big plays, just like they did on Ohio State today. And the fact that they can run the ball too must be nice. I wonder what that's like.
I know we haven't seen that, and I think what's frustrating now with Penn State is like you look at some of the backs they've had in the last 6-7 years with Saquon, Miles Sanders, and Journey Brown, and it still feels like we've never been able to consistently run the ball at any point.
Speaking of Michigan, and we kind of discussed this before we started the broadcast, but a year ago around this time, the Michigan fan base looked a lot like what Penn State's fan base seems right now. Okay, maybe the majority of the fan base was okay with Harbaugh, sticking around or being given another chance. But you had a kind of a more growing, or at least a vocal faction that wanted him canned, or was hoping he would just leave for the NFL. And you look at him now; they made a whole bunch of changes in the offseason to his assistants. Got a bunch of younger, hungrier guys in there, guys from the NFL. Mike McDonald, his defensive coordinator, came from the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe he made some other changes behind the scenes, but whatever else he did, it sure as hell worked. Look at him now. And it goes, and like you said, big offseason for James Franklin. I would imagine, now I don't think he's going to do a wholesale changing of his assistants, but I would imagine he's going to take a good look under the hood, see what's wrong, how he can best fix it, try something else. I mean, I would imagine, that'll be the case. So I guess as far as what I'm trying to say is, nothing is set. And I see people saying, well, 10 more years of this, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. And there's no guarantee. First of all, if we don't get over the hump in the next 3 years, I think Franklin leaves on his own accord after 2024 season, whenever Drew Allar's gone, we'll say. But that aside, I think there's always a possibility Penn State come out and surprise some people next year. I'm not saying, they win the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten like Michigan did. But, you come out, have like a 9-10 win season perhaps, get back to a New Year's Six bowl game, at least show some real positive momentum going forward. perhaps bring on, and the 2023 class off to a good start too, like the 22 class is bringing in. So, it could definitely help towards, like you mentioned this, Marty, in the Slack channel, but stacking class upon class similar to 22, that's what's going to be important going forward. And my hope is with this new contract that, showing that there's stability, that Franklin's going to be there for the long haul, that'll at least, I'm sure it can't hurt.
Yeah.
23, 24 kids. I'm sure, they watch TV, they look on the internet, they probably get rumors floated to them by opposing coaches that are recruiting them that, oh, Franklin's not going to be there your whole time you're there, blah, blah, blah. So I think, I'm saying I think there are going to be a good amount of changes, and you never know. I mean, the schedule does look tough for next year, not going to lie, just like this year did. But, they could, you never know. Maybe some of the teams that look daunting, they may be surprisingly mediocre or bad, or you just never know. Is what I'm trying to say. Nothing's set in stone.